thing is, until you can erase 3 Februaries, shut up. Bang! Quality over quantity. LeBron has beaten some of the best competition in NBA history. He's the GOAT emoji. I will not cuss. I will not cuss. I will not swear. I will not swear.
Where sports is the base, life and fun are the results. This is the Brian Snow Show.
Yeah, baby. It's almost the end of the week, and it's good to be back with you guys. Welcome to this Thursday afternoon edition of the Brian Snow Show. Let me begin with an apology for the fans because I have not been consistent with this program. And as my partner on the Sports Senseis, which you'll see and hear tomorrow on all of our radio and video networks, I haven't been consistent at all. And it's my own fault. But that changes starting today. And my guest today put something right in my wheelhouse. You know, the guest that I have for you, the man that I have for you this afternoon, has a book entitled, and I love the title of this, The Family Flywheel. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into a whole bunch of other stuff, but the thing that he put right in this author, entrepreneur, and executive, and very dear friend, put right in my wheelhouse, as you all know, I am from Chicago, born and bred. He said Michael Jordan and 90s Bulls in the same sentence. And he also put it in the form of a question. And the question that he posed was, what was it like, or what is it like to be a family living in the 90s in Chicago during the Michael Jordan era? I can share many stories about that, but I'm going to bring my guest on to help spread the word. His name is Aaron Shelley, and he joins me right now. Good afternoon, Aaron. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Brian?
See, why did you have, knowing I'm a sports nerd, you had to put that particular subject, and I got a 2-foot smile on my face, right in my wheelhouse about that. And it's so interesting to think about and talk about, because anyone that grew up in Chicago in the 90s, all you had to hear was from North Carolina, and you knew it was on. You knew it was on.
Yep. Yeah. Jordan was beautiful. Those were beautiful. That was a beautiful era.
So what happened since then? Might the era go down the tubes just as significantly as it went up?
Well, I don't know. I mean, from what I can tell, I mean, I watched The Last Dance, as any good Jordan fan should. And you look at the general management, you look at the top, and you go, well, it seems like they had a lot of top issues. And when you have those, I don't know how the people underneath can really succeed.
Yeah, true. Very true. And I did not watch The Last Dance. I lived it for the 13 years that he was in Chicago. For the 13 years, I saw every Jordan jersey that was on the shelf disappear. And I begged my dad only on 2 occasions to get me a Jordan jersey, and he said no. And after seeing them disappear along with the other gear, I found out why the easy way. I'm not going to spend all my money on a Jordan jersey when you got other people that will do so. But growing up in that time, watching the Bulls and the NBA for that matter during that time, you want to talk about bringing families together, as people want to say, as inadvertent as it is. You know, there are so many families gathered around the television during the time of the 80s and the 90s to watch NBA basketball. It's not even funny. It's crazy that time has come and gone, and yet we still talk about it.
Yeah, well, that's because we were all watching, like we said, we didn't have the internet where everyone's watching their own stuff as much. We had this few channels that we would all watch, and you look at who was dominating them. It was Jordan, and he was such an amazing ambassador for the NBA. He was such an amazing role model for so many people. I mean, they talk about some of the little trouble he got in with gambling, but you got to think, like, the guy was so successful.
Right.
This is not gambling of any meaningful sense to him. This was just him trying to make life interesting for himself, from what I could tell.
And he said in an interview before the 93 finals his wife was chief of finances in the household, so she knew what was coming in, what and what was going out. And if she knew what was coming in and going out, then what's the issue? What was the problem with that? I mean, it's just, to me, it's like you said, they make everything was so interesting, to say the least, at the time. And growing up in that era, it was just so fun to watch. That's the most basic thing that brought families together. It was fun to watch.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I say. I mean, I grew up in Utah, and so we had the Utah Jazz when,
Yep.
that was the big, oh, Stockton and Malone will get it this year. And I was like, well, but I like them, but they're not fun to watch. It's not Pippen and Jordan. It was just so beautiful. And the energy, the appreciation for each other. I mean, it was just so clear that they loved playing with each other, that they loved working together, that they always found new ways to do it. It was just a beautiful relationship, and they appreciated each other a ton for it. So, I mean, it was, there was nothing, and I still argue. I mean, the 3-point game that we have now is just, it's not the same that we had back then when Jordan getting beat up by the Pistons. There was such a different game. I mean, the Golden State Warriors are very fun to watch in some ways, but it's just a different game.
It is a different game. It's more outside in now than inside out. You mentioned Stockton and Malone. Of course, you got to mention Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Akeem Olajuwon, the two of the big David Robinson, three of the best centers we saw during that time, the 80s and the 90s. Of course, Ralph Sampson, who was actually a forward who played center. And, for him to be a Hall of Famer and have his career plagued by injuries, that says something. Moses Malone from Philadelphia, mentioned Abdul-Jabbar, Robert Parrish from the Boston Celtics. There's just no inside game now than it was when we were growing up watching, because you wanted to see who the center, and I dare not mention Patrick Ewing, who was one of my first favorite college centers from Georgetown University. It's an outside game now. It's not an inside game. And you wanted to see back in the day who's going to get beat up, especially when the NBA was on CBS, man.
Oh, yeah. It was a battle. I mean, you look at the Jordan rules that the Pistons were playing with. It's just amazing. And that's what's so, and when I went through the Last Dance, you just really get this inside shot of how much Jordan was pushing himself, pushing his team, how much he demanded from everyone. And I've been on teams like that where you have really demanding people who make you better. You look at Steve Jobs at Apple, people are like, man, he was so demanding. But you hear people talk about it like, yeah, but we got amazing things done and we wanted to be on that team. So that's what I can appreciate is those people who demand from themselves, they make it so everyone around them realizes they're slacking off and pushes themselves. So I don't know, that energy that Jordan brought, you have to appreciate it. You have to, I mean, he made you appreciate it because he just crushed everyone else.
And watching clips of The Last Dance, you heard Phil Jackson say to MJ during the clinching game against the Lakers in 1991, who's open? John Paxson. Well, get him the ball. It's pretty simple. It's like one of my partners I host a show with. He just simply told me, do better. And I didn't get mad at him. I didn't internally, I didn't get upset at him. And this guy's younger than me, but he knows a lot more than me when it comes to this online game. Like I said, I didn't even get mad at him. I just wrote a description. I bettered the description, and now I have it on my notes here to my right in my notebook of what I have to do. And now I'm learning to break down time. It just takes that one moment and that one person to push you to be better on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Well, and yeah, that's the thing with Jordan. You look at him, he did that every day to himself to such a point that there was no, you'll see people who like to have rules for other people. Hey, you guys need to work harder. And then you're like, but you're not doing it. But
Right.
You see Jordan where it's like, no, he pushed himself. There was no hypocrisy there at all.
Mm-mm.
It was, no, you're never going to work as hard as Jordan. And you just have to appreciate that work ethic. I mean, the same thing was Jerry Rice, in the Niners, was that same work ethic of, wow, this guy is going to put it in, day out. And you can't you know that if he demands something of you, you got to give it because he's demanding more of himself.
You mentioned my favorite receiver of all time, Jerry Rice, which leads to my favorite quarterback of all time, Joe Montana. Behind him, Steve Young. And that 49, look, it was Rice to Clark that made me a 49er fan for life when they beat the Cowboys in 81 in the NFC Championship game. You know, you get out what you put in. My dad said it to me for years. My friends continue to say it to me today because, this is how I began the show. I realized today, after my friend Drew got a hold of me, that I was slacking off, and I was giving myself and others too many excuses to slack off. And if I'm going to run my company, which brings to us being entrepreneurs, you got to demand the best of yourself and you got to give the best of yourself. If the two are not in sync, you're going to have an unbalanced scale.
Yeah. No, there's definitely that. I think it's really interesting when you look at Phil Jackson and how much he gave. I did not appreciate the amount of, I didn't appreciate Rodman until I watched The Last Dance. I was very much against him because he was on the Pistons. He was such a jerk, right? But after I watched that, I was like, wow, he was an amazing player. He had a very difficult life, very difficult childhood, all of these things. And yet Phil Jackson was able to work with that and figure it all the dynamics out to make the team successful. You know, and you look at that going, Jordan wanted that. Jordan was looking for Rodman, even though he had been beat up by him. So there was this level of Jordan going, I know what I need. I know what we need around me. And Phil Jackson being able to push himself. And I mean, it's amazing that they were that winning and that the general manager's like, now we're shutting this thing down. I mean, it's such a tragedy. I mean, could that have gone on for a few more years? Who knows? It was amazing.
Yeah. It was absolutely amazing. I would love to have seen it going on for quite a few years. I would love to have seen that going on, but you know, you just come to the point where you realize, or they make you realize, management makes you realize this may have just run its course. But I still want to see it. I still wanted to see a few more years with that particular team, the late 90s Bulls together with Harper and Rodman and MJ and Scottie Pippen and Phil Jackson running the place, and the players that they would bring in, James Buddha Edwards, Dennis Rodman, like you said, Robert Parrish was on the Bulls for a while, Spider Sally, teams that, you know, players that were beating up the Bulls in the late 80s with Spider Sally, Dennis Rodman, and James Edwards were part of that Bulls teams in the late 90s. Gonna take a pause for a break. Aaron and I will come back to talk some more about the 90s dynasty of the Chicago Bulls, and we are going to translate that into business. Back in a minute.
Active Pest Control offers the best services and prices to protect your home, offering both monthly and quarterly pest control services, plus specific services like bed bug, German roach, and flea control. Even if you can't see them, insects are all around you 24/7. Active Pest Control wants to be the first line of defense. Active Pest Control, repair, bond, best termite coverage around. Active Pest Control, 34 Jefferson Street, Newton, 770-954-9941.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today, I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad, just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Moving is a big decision. Selling or buying a home in any market, but especially today's, can raise a lot of questions. Hi, I'm Amy with Killingsworth Realty. My husband Todd and I serve the Coweta and local area. Our purpose at our first meeting is to learn your goals, answer questions, and provide resources so that you can make the best decision for you and your family. Find us online at killingsworthrealty.com or call 678-525-0047 to schedule a free consultation today to discuss your real estate needs. You don't have to do this alone.
Can your IRA stand up to the next financial crisis that our top economists are saying is at our doorsteps? By allocating a percentage of your IRA into physical gold and silver with a tax-free rollover, you can diversify and safeguard your holdings from turbulent markets and economic downturns by putting your IRA back on the gold standard. Find out how to safeguard your assets with a tax-free rollover with a Genesis Gold IRA. The only IRA that can hold physical precious metals. Call now for your free gold and silver report. Protect your IRA today with one simple phone call and learn how to qualify for up to $10,000 in free silver. Call Genesis Gold Group, empowering faith-driven stewardship. 800-509-2163. 800-509-2163. 800-509-2163. That's 800-509-2163. If you have diabetes and you're on Medicare, you may qualify for a free continuous glucose monitor system. Managing your diabetes is crucial to your health. The new CGM systems can automatically manage your diabetes better for you. And by using a CGM system, you can eliminate forever one thing most people with diabetes hate the most: finger sticks. Now it's possible to manage your diabetes better, end the painful finger sticks, and get a new CGM monitoring system at little or no cost to you. We even provide in-home delivery and do all the insurance paperwork for you. Now is the best time to manage your diabetes better and get your continuous glucose monitored. Call now for details. 800-897-0014. 800-897-0014. 800-897-0014. That's 800-897-0014. Paid for by U.S. Med.
WQEE 99.1 FM The Key, home of Southern sports and talk. Noonan, Sharpsburg, Franklin.
The thing is, until you can erase 3 Februaries, shut up.
Where sports is the base, life and fun are the results. This is the Brian Snow Show.
We are off to a flying start here on the Brian Snow Show, and thank you all for joining us. Aaron Shelley is my guest as we are taking a stroll down memory lane, looking at basketball of the 80s and the 90s, and one of my favorite rivalries, aside of Celtics-Lakers, and it hit close to home for me, Bulls and Pistons, because you wanted to see how the Bulls were going to take that next step, climb the mountain, which they eventually did in 1991, but they had to go through a rough patch, and the Pistons were that rough patch.
Yep, they definitely were. It was they were not backing down at all, and it was, I mean, the Pistons played essentially to the rules, and the refs let them get away with what they could. But I mean, that's what you'd hope. If you're competing in anything, you should be pushing the limits on whatever you're doing.
Man, Chuck Daly was a master at figuring out a way to take away your team's strength. And boy, did he get a lot of practice in taking away the strength of Michael Jordan. And it took Phil Jackson to realize, you have to trust your teammates. That's the biggest thing that, to me, unlocked Michael Jordan. Trusting his teammates, trusting his Bulls teammates, because they put the right pieces around him when they drafted Grant, when they drafted Pippen, when they traded for John Paxson, when they traded for B.J. Armstrong. And the trade for Pippen's rights was like the biggest piece of the puzzle. The other biggest piece of the puzzle was having Phil Jackson coach them, because now you have the right leader in place, and it was up to Phil Jackson to manage all the egos, like you said earlier, and put the right combination on the floor to have the Bulls be as successful as they were.
Yeah. Well, and that's what you love about the game. At least I love about most of the sports, football and the NBA, is there's so much strategy that's going on behind the scenes. And the more you understand it, the more you can appreciate all of the pieces that had to come together. It wasn't just a simple, hey, we got the best players in the league. You see a lot of these superstar teams that get built and then they don't win. And
Right.
you're like, oh, because it has nothing to do with how good each of them are. It has everything to do with the synergy that you're able to create on the court.
That is a great word that you use, synergy, and it applies, and it's so important, not just in sports, but in business. You and I both being entrepreneurs, it's so tough when you're always on the clock to find that synergy with the right person or people to keep you going, keep you competitive, and keep you producing at the highest level. And lately for me, it's been my wife, Jody, that has really pushed me to be better and pushed me, in essence, not to be a jack of all trades, not to be a play-by-play announcer and a sports talk host in the same year. I mean, she looked me in the eye after we met and said, your radio show is going to make us millions. Now it's like, what took me so long for the light to finally turn on? Do I love doing play-by-play? Absolutely. Hot Rod Hundley, Jim Durham, two of my favorites of all time. And I will always want and crave that local flavor. But what I finally decided that for the time being, this has got to get all of my concentration, building the network, building the shows, building the right building the right people. What turned the light on for you to become an entrepreneur, and in the midst of being an entrepreneur? What were the lights that turned on for you?
I think in the early days, it was just dissatisfaction with the way things were run. And the second one was I wanted to actually make a good upside, right? If you're not an entrepreneur, you don't have any you very rarely have much of an upside,
Right.
because other people have it or the business is already big enough. So there was an upside piece in there. And I think that's what we see in a lot of, the contracts that people get, what's my upside, how based on my performance. And so I think it was a lot of, well, where's my upside? And then once you start to get a taste of being your own and having your own flexibility and managing yourself, then it just becomes, you love the freedom and you love the impact that you can have.
Is it true from one entrepreneur to another? And I just said it a moment ago, but I want to hear it from another one. Is it true that you're always on the clock because your brain's constantly going, you're thinking of ideas and how to implement them, or in some cases, how not to implement them? So is it true that you're always on?
I think most entrepreneurs love what they're doing. And so it's not, you're always on in this negative, like I'm always on the clock and I wish I wasn't.
Right.
Much more, this is what I love to do. So of course I'm reading books on this. I'm thinking about this. Whenever I meet people, I'm talking about it. It's that type of mentality, not, hey, I hate this and I wish I could go take a vacation. For me personally, I've traveled, I've seen a lot of things. Now it's more like, where's the impact and how do I maximize that? It's more the internal drive. And that's where I think you see people going back to Jordan. You saw how he kept having to create new things to motivate himself. They talk about, no, that player never said that. Well, whatever. He made, Jordan made something up, or he heard something and then made it into a thing. And then that's what motivated him. And that's where you see in a lot of cases as an entrepreneur, it's like, who is above you or ahead of you that's motivating, then that you're looking at as an inspiration to what you can achieve.
One of the most successful campaigns can be described in 3 words: be like Mike. When that campaign dropped and all the versions of that commercial thereof, and then to have a fellow Hall of Famer in Allen Iverson just simply saying a sentence, man, I wanted to be like Mike. It forced MJ, like you said, to be even more creative than he was already when he came into the league in 1984. You see these stars now in the NBA get shoe contracts that are ridiculous and they haven't put foot to floor. Adidas was the preferred brand of Michael Jordan. You know, everyone knows
Yep.
that. But when Nike came over the top with an offer and said, let's see what you do with the Bulls, they only had to wait half a season because they knew they had something special. They knew he was on his way to what turned out to be a Hall of Fame career, and it started with the Rookie of the Year in the 84-85 season. You know, what makes businesses attach themselves to your brand? What gets businesses to attach themselves to you and your brand, and how do they read the significance that you're going to have?
Well, I mean, they want good representatives. And if you look at the Be Like Mike campaign, Mike was such an amazing role model. I mean, you could look at him from his work ethic, you look at him from his family, you look at how he treated, you know, his parents he was so close with. There were so many elements, even in politically, you know, he's like, I don't know, you know, I'm Republicans buy shoes too, is the quote, right? So he wasn't like taking sides. He's like, he was so inclusive. And so that's where I think there's this point of, he was like, I'm bringing this together. And that's how he was such a great ambassador, is he was like, my game is the game. I think so many of the athletes now are getting caught up in the social media and all these things, and cause it's like, you know, do you really know about such and such cause in depth to actually make a statement? Probably not. But you know the game. So talk about the game.
Yeah. And, you know, that's my niche. Talking sports, talking about the game, and tying it into what I do as an entrepreneur and what others do as entrepreneurs. Man, it forces you to reinvent yourself when something doesn't work. It forces you to like improve what you want to do and discover what kind of an impact you want to have. Someone asked me recently, you know, with you getting over your battle with cancer, surviving pancreatic cancer, what do you want to do? Someone put that in a simple question, but it made me think. I'll tell you what, it made me think for about a week. It's the question now as an adult that I get that you got as a child. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah. Yeah. And
it's basically what it comes down to. What do you want to be when you grow up? You know, my wife posed this question to me. She says, what do you want Snowman Multimedia to be? I said ESPN, but with honesty.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting that you're talking about, you're talking about your wife, right? That's where I look at it, and I'm like, if you look at so many successful people, they either have their wife or their family behind them in certain ways, and we often don't see that. I mean, like Jordan had his family with him most every game, from what I understand, right?
Yes.
There's that tight connection, and you see that with entrepreneurs. I think there's this myth of the lone entrepreneur who does everything themselves. But then you look underneath the successful ones and you see, oh, they had family, they had a wife, they had these other people who were on board. And I think it's essential, you know, when you get married to somebody who has the similar goals, long-term goals as you, and will sit there and be like, not nag you, be like, hey, Brian, you're sucking right now, make more money. Be like, hey, Brian, remember that dream you had? How do we focus? How's that going? It's not a nag. It's kind of just mirroring back the things that you said about yourself and forcing you to push yourself. And that's the other place that you see, like, getting those people who are helping you stay motivated. There's a term I call emotional diversification, where it's like, you need people. There's times when life just sucks. Like, you know, as an entrepreneur, it's never going to be great, but you need those people who are going to help pick you up from those negative experiences emotionally to get you back on track.
And for me, not only is it my wife, it's also my family, my children, my grandchildren, my daughter Sonia. And I told this story this morning when Jody, Sonia, and I were all working at Amazon warehouse in Durham, North Carolina. Right after Christmas, we worked in the smalls department, and all the small packages were coming in. They had different color codes and zip codes, and I'm wondering, how the hell am I going to do this? Now, my daughter does not like sports at all. Does not. And I'm wondering, how am I going to figure this out? Everybody else was flying around, getting everything done. My wife was flying around. My friends there were flying around. And here I am stuck in one spot. And I'm going, there's no way I'm going to be able to figure this out. And I had tears coming down my face. That's when my daughter pulled me aside and said, I can explain this to you and I can put it in your language. All right, I don't know how, but give it to me. She pointed me to my left and she said, you see this color? This is in left field. You see this color? This is in center field. You see this color? This is in right field. This is in left. This is in center field. This is in right field. And it clicked. I gave her a big hug and I said, thank you, and flew through that pile in 40 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's essentially what I'm trying to do with my book, is try to help people take business principles and apply them into their families. Because I think if you understand one of the metaphors, then you can apply those over and you go, oh, I get I get how I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, Michael Jordan, he's like, he was probably focused on the game. I hadn't heard that his wife was kind of the CFO, right?
Yeah.
So you got this, like, she doesn't need to be a great player. I need someone who can do the other things that I need. Right. And so that's where I think a lot of people nowadays are getting into this weird thing of, well, and some of the superstar teams, like we all have the scorers. Sure. But where's your rebounders? Where's your specialty players?
Where's your defenders?
And that's where I think in families, people need to be looking, especially in your marriage relationship. What are the things I don't like to do? What are my weaknesses? Great. I need a spouse who's going to fill in some of those and push me in those ways. Like you need this, you need a complement person. Scotty and Jordan were very close, but then you had Rodman and these other players who were support. Mm-hmm. You need this complementary person in your life, in your marriage relationship. And broadly, you need complementary people in your business. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful.
I go back again. That's where my wife comes in. She just told me, you concentrate on the electronic stuff and the content. I'll concentrate on the finances and marketing and getting you out there. And I knew I found who I wanted when she looked at me and she said, I've accomplished all I wanted to accomplish. I want to see you chase your dreams. I mean, she looked me dead in the eye and told me, you chase your dreams. And after my cancer surgery last year, and just as recent as this past weekend, she said, all I want you to do is just take care of the house and take care of your shows and build your company. That's all I need. I'll carry us financially for a while because I know you're going to carry us in the future. Yeah. And it hit me. It hit me like a shot. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why was I just given a lot of creative freedom and I don't know it? Right? Like, where did this come from? More to the point, where was this when I needed it? It was here all the time.
Well, yeah, I think it's beautiful when you see this. Your wife is essentially saying, I will invest in this relationship and I'm going to invest my time and energy in this position for you. And it's beautiful when you have women who are investing in their husbands, because quite often you see this massive blossom that occurs and you're like, well, that guy's awesome. And then you look at it and you go, yeah, but his wife, you see this specialization in the support system that they built to get him there. And that's, I think it's a tragedy when you see some of these amazing athletes. I think it's like Aaron Rodriguez, who played for the Patriots and then went to prison after signing a $40 million contract.
$40 million contract, right.
And you're just like, what happened? How did this work? He just didn't have all the support systems in place. So he had the money taken care of, he had the abilities, but he didn't have the social resources, or he had negative social resources that actually drug him down. And that's what you see when you have these people who are investing and in you and helping you be better. They're actually picking you up and you're picking them up. So that's the flywheel effect that I like to talk about. Like, we're all getting better together. And over time, you look at your family down the road, you're like, wow, now here's what I've built. Now I can pass this wisdom on, as well as these resources onto my kids.
The family flywheel is what we will discuss next. Aaron Shelley joins me here on the Brian Snow Show. And the family flywheel, what's that? He'll explain when y'all get back.
So this thing called sports, it has fans again. It has full stadiums, full arenas, and more. And you want to be a part of it, don't you? Of course you do. If you begin to scour the resale market, there will be tickets available. And what you need to get those tickets that you want so badly is SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the app available to you that lends a hand in helping you get the tickets that you want for the events that you want. SeatGeek rates the tickets on a 1 to 10 scale, and the best part is the tickets are vetted for authenticity, so you know what you are getting and you know you are not getting scammed. And now you can save even more by using the code SNOWMAN and getting $20 off with your very first purchase. Yes, you can do all of that with the power of SeatGeek, helping you get to the games that you want, so you fans can fan. So let's all fan.
Hey, sports fans, it's Rod Peterson here, host of The Rod Peterson Show, inviting you to join us daily for 2 hours of Atlanta's funnest sports talk right here on WQEE. I say fun because it is. You've never heard a show like it because we make the listeners a part of the show every day between noon and 2 p.m. Eastern. You'll hear plenty of the best sports talk, including the latest on the Falcons, the Braves, and more. And who knows, you might even hear you. That's the Rod Peterson Show, daily at noon, right here on WQEE 99.1 FM.
Moving is a big decision. Selling or buying a home in any market, but especially today's, can raise a lot of questions. Hi, I'm Amy with Killingsworth Realty. My husband Todd and I serve the Coweta and local area. Our purpose at our first meeting is to learn your goals, answer questions, and provide resources so that you can make the best decision for you and your family. Find us online at killingsworthrealty.com or call 678-525-0047 to schedule a free consultation today to discuss your real estate needs. You don't have to do this alone.
It's the best in sports and entertainment, and get locked in and locked down with Rhino Radio Penitentiary, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. with your host, me, Ryan O'Neill, each and every morning, right here with the best in sports and entertainment, all the way from professional sports to college sports to River Dragons hockey and everything in between, including some of the very best local and national guests. It's the Rhino Radio Penitentiary, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday, right here on 99.1 FM WQEE. WQEE 99.1 FM, The Key, home of Southern sports and talk. Noonan, Sharpsburg, Franklin.
Where sports is the base, life and fun are the results. This is the Brian Snow Show.
And now that we have whet your appetite, we now come to the main course called the Family Flywheel, with the inventor thereof, Aaron Shelley, joining me here this Thursday afternoon. All right, man, dive in. Tell me about the Family Flywheel. You got to tell me about this because I love the title and I want you to talk about it.
Yeah, so the Family Flywheel, the term comes from the book Good to Great, where it talks about, you make progress and then you're able to make more progress based on the progress you've made. You look at companies. They do this all the time. Walmart took 20 years to build their first 1,000 stores, and then they built 1,100 in 1 year. So you see this, like, you get bigger and you get bigger in the corporate world. And then I look at the family, I'm like, well, where's that effect? And I think it's there. It's just most people don't understand it and don't look for it. So the concept is really looking at your family holistically and saying, there's the financial resources you're building, but there's also social resources. In the business world, this would be your brand, as well as your relationships. And then there's the human resources that you're building, and your business is constantly building those, and your family is too, right? You get more skills, you get more abilities, then you can use those, make more money, right? Then you take that money, you can invest in more education, better microphones, whatever your business, and then you kind of flywheel it that way. And so families can do that as well if they have a strong culture. And especially they can do it generationally if they're able to pass that culture that's successful onto their children, as well as, there's some strategy and structure parts of the business model as well. But it's really, how do you get that flywheel going of, I'm investing in these relationships, then that relationship is now having some monetary payoffs. Now I'm investing in that payoff in an education. Now I'm investing in other relationships, right? That's the type of thing we're talking about when we get into a flywheel.
Well, how can that culture be? Where does it start for a family to create that kind of culture where everyone comes together, especially not even during, but especially in the midst of difficulty?
Well, I think it comes down to, what are you trying to accomplish as a family? right? I mean, we can all get different jobs. You talked about working at Amazon. I've worked at different jobs. There's just like revenue streams coming into a business, right? But you can always, and then you're like, now you have this, your Brian show, that's another revenue stream. And you talked about your sports talk, your on-court announcing, that was another revenue stream. So you're like, well, what am I doing there? And then do I focus on one, cut off those revenue streams, switch jobs entirely? So you just say every family has these multiple revenue streams, but where are you trying to go as a family? Is there any mission? Like, what is your purpose as the Brian Snow family? What are you trying to live for? I mean, you had this bout with cancer, it's like, well, you got a second chance in life and you got to also a wake-up call. So what do you want this chapter of your life to be about? And then is there a family component? Like, what do you and your wife want to build? Is it a successful empire to hand on to your children? Is it a successful family that supports each other and then becomes, it's like doctors or lawyers? Or what is that strategy? I call that the strategy. What are you trying to accomplish in your life?
What was the strategy for you and what you were trying to accomplish and create with your family? When did you and your family come together and say, okay, this is our mission statement, this is what we want to do?
Yeah, a lot of it can come from religion. But I would say generally it was when I first started, like most businesses, you start out, you get married and you're like, is this even going to work? Like, am I going to be able to make enough money? So you're in survival mode, right? So usually the first few years of the marriage are like trying to work out. You're fighting about stuff because you have differences of culture. You have differences in the roles and responsibilities. And then if you have kids, that's changing. You now have new roles that need to get done. So building the culture, then I think after, there was different points for me and my wife. When we got really specific about it was probably about 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, when we were like, okay, our kids are getting older and we've kind of had a culture, but I wanted to be explicit because so many of my siblings got different messages from my parents. And so I'm like, if my parents were giving different messages, I'm sure I'm giving it to my 4 kids. So how do I give them a consistent message and consistent values? And what is it that we want to do as our family? And so I pulled in my daughter's 22. She just got married. And so we pulled in her husband and it's like, what are we trying to accomplish as a family? What is our mission statement? And if you can't come up with it for yourself, it's hard. You got to kind of go through this process for yourself, then for your wife, and then your wife and you together. And then you can go to the extended family that, with your siblings or your children and then siblings possibly. But it's what are you trying to accomplish that anyone would want to join? That's why I think there's a place where, like in a business, if you joined a business and you're like, well, what are you guys trying to do? Well, I don't know. I don't want to be this. This is stupid. But if they're like, we are trying to, at the last business, we're trying to make contractors heroes because we were supporting roofing people who put the roofs on our head over our homes. And so if you look at it in that context, you go, yeah, I can get behind that. These are heroic people who are rain, snow, sleet, any of those problems, hurricanes, they're up there trying to put the roofs back on our homes. And so I think it's about what motivates you personally and how are you going to contribute to society, and then extending that out in your family, and then getting into the culture and the strategy, the structural pieces, and how do you actually accomplish that big objective, that big mission you have?
Why do couples in trying to find all this out have so much friction, and how do they either reduce it or overcome it?
I think most couples have a lot of friction because they don't really have a set out goal. If you're sitting in a company and, if you and I were partners and I say, I want to go own an NBA team. And you're like, I want to go on an NFL team. Why are we in business?
Right.
We should go get out of business. And that's what you look at most couples. I think they're like, well, I want to be successful. I want to have my needs met. I want my kids to be successful. It's these very broad things, like, oh, I'm starting a business. What do you want from your business? I want it to be successful. Okay. Define success. Does that mean your kids go to college? Does that mean they go into, the military? What does that mean? What does success mean? Well, they're happy. Okay. But they could be happy in jail. Is that okay? Well, no. it's like you kind of need to think through what you're trying to accomplish, because if you're not trying to accomplish anything specific, then it's hard to know, are we going in the right direction or not? And then you end up fighting about, should we go on a cruise or should we go invest in real estate or into a show? Like, what should we do? And then you just have arguments about tactics because you haven't put together an overall strategy.
I never thought I would mention this, and I never thought that this would cross my mind. But in talking to you and talking to my wife and a couple of others, something that Jody and I have started to develop a mode of operation for our business, setting down specific goals, because like you and like many others, I was just wandering aimlessly. I had an idea, but until this past year, honestly, and I've been at this 20 plus years, until this past year, I never answered any of the specific questions, because in all honesty, until Jody and until my kid, I never had a family to think about. It was just me. And I always, let me go ahead and admit it aloud, flew by the seat of my pants. But now it's like, okay, there are some questions I need to answer. And as I said, until this past year, I never thought about them, let alone try to answer them. And now I'm trying to answer them, and listening to you now, I know there's a few more that we have to write down and we have to answer. But the best thing that we started doing, writing everything down.
Yeah, if you write down the goals and you measure them, right? If you're you're like with your podcast, how many listens am I trying to get to? How do I get, if you have no goal, you're like, well, I guess we got one more this quarter. Great, right? That's progress.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're sitting there like, no, I want to 10x it. Okay, now I have to think about, how would I do that? What sources? Right. How am I going to go through that? So as soon as you have something that you can write down, then you can actually try to achieve it. If you look at every person in sports, we know their stats. We freaking know everything. How many shots they took in the paint, how many what's their percentage, how many 3-pointers, what's their 3-point percentage, what area, we know all these stats, and the players who are good work on the areas that they want to really enhance, or they avoid the ones that they know they're not good at, right? Because they go, I see the stats. And that's where we need to get this feedback loop into our families. Well, what are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to have X amount of dollars in the bank? Are we trying to buy those things, buy a real estate? What are we trying to do? And then you and your wife together, when you're coming together and you're like, well, we wanted to buy the real estate, so we're not going to go on this vacation because this is more important. And it will actually fulfill you both, if that's really your goal together, right, more than the vacation would have. Right? That's the thing that's so impactful, is I see so many people, they complain, I hate my job, but then you ask them, what would you do if you didn't have to work? I don't know. Well, then shut up. Like, you have no vision. You just, well, I don't like to do this. Well, guess what? Life is not peaches. I do not know anyone who is successful who never did crappy things, whether it's in every discipline I've been in, right? You look at Jordan. How many freaking free throw shots did that guy take? Right? Over and over. And the amount of practice and the amount of just over and over. I don't know. That's a lot of discipline. And that is not quote unquote fun, like a lot of people today think work should always be fun. It's going to be hard work. And so that's the place where, how do we train that discipline into ourselves? How do we have that as a cultural element? And how do we know that that's what it's going to take to achieve success?
And oh boy, you mentioned the key word, and it's a key word that I have struggled with, and I will say it aloud: discipline. Especially lately. How important is it? And we'll close with this question. How important is it for any entrepreneur or family of entrepreneurs to not only get that discipline, develop it together, but the most important thing, maintain it?
Yeah, I think the key to discipline is more the habit stacking. If you've seen the book Atomic Habits, how do you get these basic things and go, here's what I do, and this just becomes the habit, and it's not discipline so much. They talk about, how do you discipline yourself if you're on a diet?
Yeah.
The easiest way to do that is, don't buy the foods you don't want to eat, because if they're not in the house, you won't eat them.
Right.
And so it's not discipline and willpower that much. It's just like, what are the little things that prevent you from doing the negative things, or what are the little things that help you do the big things? And so that's where I think it's there's a book called Influencer where it also talks about setting up your environment for success. If you don't want to watch TV every day, why is it in your front room next to your kitchen where you have to go every day? Right? You want to set up your environment so that you're going, hey, I want to do this. So I think discipline may be overused because a lot of times you're just, well, I hang out with these people and they want to drink and I don't want to drink. Okay, well, you need to change up that group, right? A lot of stuff, it's just like, how are you going to avoid that situation? But if you try to do the willpower, like I need to wake up at 5 a.m., but my wife and I like to stay up watching stuff till midnight. All right. Well, you got to figure out a different way to connect or change the 5 a.m. because they can't work together. So I think it's much more about how do you set up the game to win versus trying to discipline yourself through it.
And I'll share this story. I went through this last night. I told myself I'm going to completely, because I have a very small area, my wife and I do, where we work here at home. And I said, you know what? I want to have a 2-monitor setup so I can see what I'm doing when I multitask. Well, it took me taking this thing apart to realize I don't have enough room. So I had to discipline myself and tell myself, I don't have enough room in here. But then today came the second half of that. What if I set up my laptop in my old office and have that be the radio station and have it constantly running, and whatever I can pick up from there, I can send in. I can send in here. So that really, really helped. And I can use the 2-monitor setup in my old office, but I'll only be in there a short time because my production's in here and my main studio is in here. So that was huge for me. When you have a discovery like that and build off of that, how huge is that?
Yeah, I think it's one of those big things where you realize this isn't a big willpower game. It's just more me trying to think through problems and fix them. Right? I think so many people are in the mode of, oh, I have this big thing and I'll never get there, instead of like, how do I just take one step forward today, maybe 2 steps tomorrow, right? It's just like lifting weights. If you go into the gym and you haven't lifted for a while and you max out, you're just going to be destroyed.
Right.
But if you go, I'm just going to try to do gradual stuff and I'm going to just come every day, so I'm not going to be sore because I'm maxing out and hurting myself. Over time, you're going to be like, I've come and I enjoy it. I mean, I personally find like I really enjoy listening to books and listening to audio tapes when I work out. So I like the learning actually more than the exercise. So I do the exercise so that I can learn. It's a weird thing of like, so I think a lot of it's just setting up yourself, understanding yourself and being self-aware. Like, why do I not want to do this part of the job? Oh, yeah. It's because I don't enjoy it. Oh, maybe my wife can do it. Maybe I can hire someone for it. Right. There's those places of do what you do best. Jordan's a bad example because he was all defensive and all offensive player. I mean, the guy was amazing, but you just saw like he wasn't playing against centers all the time. Right? He knew what his role was. He knew what his thing was. And then he was optimizing for that. And I think for us, it's the same piece of how do we learn about ourselves, know what we need around us to succeed. And then you get that so we can succeed.
Aaron Shelley joining us here on this Thursday edition of the Brian Snow Show, talking the family flywheel and taking a stroll down memory lane, the NBA basketball of the 80s and the 90s. I appreciate you, my friend. I'd love to have you on again.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brian. It was a lot of fun. I love talking about the Bulls. So many good memories.
Indeed. We will do this again soon, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Man, taking a stroll down memory lane like that just makes you realize what you miss, what you love, what you want to watch, what you won't watch. And so much of everything ties into sports, ties into sports culture, and, ties into entrepreneurship. And if you are an entrepreneur, and you just heard Aaron say, it's more about establishing patterns, establishing good patterns, and establishing good behaviors. And that's been admittedly my biggest issue, especially lately, establishing good behaviors instead of disciplining my way to and through everything. And I want to shout out my buddy Drew Willingham, my fellow sports sensei, who you'll see here tomorrow on Snowman Multimedia and the Sports Senseis Unleashed. He really got to me today. But for once, I didn't take it as an attack. I didn't take it as anything negative. He was just right. I have to do better. And I'm going to do better by y'all, by myself, and by my family. My time is up. We hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. We'll be back tomorrow with a Friday edition of the Brian Snow Show with Mike Debate as we talk NFL draft. And there's going to be a lot of talk over that hour. God bless y'all, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you for tuning into The Brian Snow Show, where sports is the base, life and fun are the results.